This year, we went out on grass almost 6 weeks earlier than we ever have. And right after we did, it started freezing hard again. Today, I want to talk about what that actually looks like operationally. Specifically, what happens to electric netting stakes in a hard freeze climate, why that matters, and what we change to make it work. I'll also tell you what the does look like on pre-kidding green forage, which is something we've not had access to in the past with electric netting. Let's get to it. Hey there, welcome to GoatWise. I'm Millie Bradshaw, animal scientist and rancher. Here we talk meat goats, feeding strategies, goat fencing, and livestock management that holds up in real life. If you care about raising goats well and building systems that actually work, you're in the right place. Let's talk livestock. Real quick, before we get into what's happening on the ranch, if this podcast has been useful to you, I would really appreciate it if you'd leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Scroll down to ratings and reviews, tap write a review, and that's it. It helps more serious livestock producers find the show, and it genuinely matters to me. I read every one. And if you're heading into kidding season and you want to track your due dates without doing the math, grab the free kidding due date chart at goatwise.com/kidding-chart. It'll put you on the email list as well, and I send something useful every Friday. Here's what's happening on the ranch. Last week covered nearly every weather category imaginable: snow, rain, mud, sunshine, and plenty of wind. In the middle of that, we had kittens born and chicks arrive, which always makes spring feel fully underway. Knowing the weather would likely shut us down for a couple days, Stacy and I took a quick trip north to pick up equipment and visit family in Idaho. It was a good reset before diving back into spring work. The does are still out grazing, and the electric fence is getting moved every single day, rain, snow, or sunshine. The goats are looking great, and kidding season starts in about 3 weeks. All right, so this has been a very strange weather year. We don't normally go out on grass until June 1st. That's been our standard with goats and electric netting. We're in the high desert of Utah, near the Wyoming border, and June 1st is just the reality of our climate and elevation. This year, the grass was coming along fast and early, so we went out on April 20th. That is almost 6 weeks ahead of schedule. Now, I would have preferred to let the grass get further ahead of us than we did. I really wanted to let it grow a little more before we put goats on it, but it was in good enough shape, and a couple of things were pushing us toward going out sooner. The grass was moving fast enough that waiting felt like it was going to cost us, and we were also getting low on hay. If you remember from last fall, we went on feed a little early because we ran out of easily accessible feed. Fall is Stacy's busiest fence building season, and spending several hours a day moving electric netting through the brush was just not going to happen. So we went on hay sooner, which meant we used it up sooner, and we didn't want to get to zero. Everything just lined up that going out on grass was the right call. So we went out April 20th, the does went on grass, and it was still freezing at night, but not too cold. Then it started dropping into the teens. And that's where moving electric netting in freeze country gets real. We've talked about our constraints with electric netting before. Episode 13 goes into the details of how we run netting on this operation and why. But one thing that doesn't get discussed enough, and I think it's because a lot of the electric netting conversation online comes from climates that don't freeze hard or don't freeze late, is what freezing temperatures actually do to your fence. When those stakes freeze hard into the ground, they're not coming out. And if you try to force them, you're probably going to ruin your fence. We have very hard soil. We're not pushing stakes in by hand. We drive them in. It doesn't take much of a freeze to lock them down solid. And the older the fence, the worse it is. On the newer fencing we have, the stakes are still pretty slick and shiny. Not much wear, not much rust. Those are a little more forgiving. The older fence where the stakes have a lot of use on them, those are the ones that get absolutely stuck and do not want to come out. We have both old and new that we're using, so we're dealing with a mix. What we've learned the hard way over the years is that it is very easy to ruin electric netting trying to pull it out when the ground is still frozen. The drivable stakes are embedded in the post, and if you pull too much, you can pull them out. After that, they won't stay in the post. There's also an insulator ring on the stake up next to the post. The bottom strand on the netting runs through that ring, and prying on a post to get it out usually breaks the ring. It's just not worth it. So here's what we changed this spring. On the mornings when it had frozen hard the night before, we didn't attempt to pull the fence. My son started taking the fence down in the afternoon, after the sun had been hitting the ground, after we were back above freezing, and he could get everything out easily at that time. Then we'd set the new section in the morning before the does were moved. So the sequence flipped. Instead of tear down in the morning and set up for the current day, it became tear down in the afternoon and set up the next morning. That has worked out reasonably well. Some afternoons we can get a second section built out for the following day as well, which gives us a little buffer. It just depends on what everyone has going on, because right now we're all running in different directions. But for the most part, that afternoon teardown has kept us from fighting frozen stakes and has kept the fence intact. As a side note, we do use electric netting in winter, but that is a completely different setup. We don't move it in winter. That's its own whole management approach, and it's something I want to do an episode on down the road because electric netting serves a very important role here during the winter. But that's not what we're talking about today. Today is specifically this shoulder season situation where we've gone out early, the nights are still freezing relatively hard, and you need to figure out how to keep the rotation moving without ruining your equipment. Now, here's what I'm genuinely excited about, and it is something we have never done before. This is probably the first time we've had an extended stretch of green grass that we could actually access with electric netting before kidding. Typically, the does are either still on hay going into kidding, or they go out on pasture right at kidding time, or maybe a couple weeks before. Pre-kidding green forage, actual high-quality, high-moisture spring grass, that is not something we've had available for a full 6 weeks before kidding in previous years. The does look really good right now. They're slicking off, their bellies are full by 10 o'clock in the morning, and they're just laying down content. The grass quality is excellent, it's green, it's got good moisture in it, and they're barely drinking any water, so we're not hauling much. We've also had some rain, not a lot, but a storm every week or two, which has kept things moving. The regrowth on the areas we've already grazed looks beautiful. We're 3 weeks out from kidding. I have never in 8 years been looking at does that have been on grass for this long going into June 1st. I really don't know what to expect, and I mean that in a good way. I'm curious to see how it affects them through kidding and early lactation. It's going to be one of those things I'll have a lot more to say once we're through it. I also want to mention what I'm seeing on the land side of things, because it ties directly back to how we managed this pasture last year. That pasture, the one they're rotating through right now, is the same ground we ran them on last year, moving every single day, every single piece of ground, getting 364 days of rest. The goats deposited a lot of manure and urine on that ground. There was a lot of trampling, a lot of hoof action, breaking the soil crust, and I think that helped the soil absorb moisture better this year. Here's what's interesting. According to people who track precipitation in our area, this has been an extremely dry year. We are down significantly on moisture compared to last year. But when I go out and look at that pasture, I think we have better grass this year than we did last year on the same ground with less water. I went back through old photos and I'm pretty confident that's true. That's incredibly encouraging. That tells me that what we're doing is actually moving the needle on soil health, that the management choices are compounding in a direction that's working. We're going to leave the regrowth alone. We want those plants to rebuild their reserves, get carbon back into the soil, and do their thing. We're not planning to go back to those areas until they go dormant, and then we may graze them again in the fall, or we may let them rest. One thing I dropped the ball on, and I'm going to own this because it's one of those things that just happens when everyone's running at full speed. We did not take a mineral feeder out when we took the does out on grass. There's always that moment of, we need to get a mineral feeder down there, and then the next thing happens and it doesn't get done. I just made myself a note. That feeder is going out. Now, the grass is so good and so green that they might not hit it as hard as they normally would. I'm genuinely not sure. But we are 3 weeks out from kidding, and I want mineral in front of them going into it, so that is getting handled today. If you are in a similar situation, going out early, dealing with freezing nights, running electric netting in hard freeze climate, the afternoon teardown is worth trying. It sounds simple because it is, but it took us a few years and some ruined fence to land on it. The stakes will come out after the sun's been working on that ground. Fighting them in the morning before they thaw is just going to cost you fence. Let the afternoon do the work, at least in the spring. In the fall, when the sun is lower in the sky, the ground often doesn't warm up enough in the afternoon unless it's on a south-facing slope. But for early spring management, this is what's working for us this year. If you have any questions or comments, send me an email, millie@drycreekpastures.com. See you next week. Hey there, thanks for listening today. If this episode was helpful, share it with another producer who's raising goats. And if you haven't already, leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts. It helps more serious livestock owners find the show. As always, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for veterinary advice. I'll see you next week here on GoatWise.